I've been asked a ton to compare my 2021 Toyota Tacoma to my 1997 Lexus LX450. Both are on 39s, both are on 529 gear ratios, both are, they're more comparable than you might think if you take price out of the equation. And the more I use these, and now that I've built both from stock to being like really good little trail rigs, I think the question isn't which one is better. I think the question is, why will you never see a newer Toyota as good as one of these older Toyotas?
After having so many of you ask me to compare these two vehicles, it's very clear that you don't mind an apples to oranges comparison. And to be completely honest, I don't mind either. I don't know why you can't compare apples to oranges. And in this case, it's not quite as drastic of a comparison as you might think. Yes, the price is astronomically different for these two vehicles, but they're both on 39-inch BFG KM3s. They're both on method bead grips. They both have RCV axle shafts. They both have, Powerstop brakes. They both have 529 Yukon gear ratios and ARB lockers front and rear. Like, these have a ton of comparable parts, and I think I have built both of these out to about as good as you can get them for each generation. Yeah, you could do one-ton swaps and stuff, but if you want to keep, these as like Toyotas, this is about as good as it gets. They're so well-rounded, they're great on the highway, they're great off-road, and I think that a comparison is actually kind of fun.
The 80 series Landcruiser is the last of like a whole generation of trucks that are low-tech. They're super reliable, they're easy to work on, they're straight axle. Personally, I love it.
There is one very important metric when it comes to rock crawling that makes this comparison even more apples to oranges. But again, we're out here having fun, right? And that is the lift. There's only a 1-inch lift on this Landcruiser, which is just insane with 39s. And then we've got a 3.5-inch lift, which is also extremely low, but much higher, and that's in the Tacoma. And when you only have a 1-inch lift, if you don't carry the right line, it's very easy to get just buried in rocks. And it just rained this morning, unfortunately, and that did make this usually very easy rock garden a little bit harder to stay on course.
Pointy rock, not pointy, but it's enough. It's right between the transmission crossmember and the fuel tank skid.
Perfect. Well, if it wasn't slippery, I could have held my line.
That's the thing.
When I bought this extremely worn out, high miles Lexus LX450, it was completely bone stock. And I only got this trail ready about a month ago. Since then, I think this is my 4th trip, and every time I've been in the rocks, and I haven't used the Tacoma since I finished this, but every time I've been in the rocks, I'm thinking, man, I feel like my very seasoned Tacoma would be able to walk this fairly easy, and it seems like it's a lot harder in this Landcruiser. That doesn't help my narrative that old trucks are better than new trucks.
Coming through.
I felt it just like in multiple places. Finally stuck. This situation does not help my narrative at all. The narrative is old trucks are good too. In fact, I think old trucks are often better. But holy cow, does this feel so superior right now. This is the opposite of what I expected to feel in the video. The extra clearance is just, IFS, if you can get strong IFS, the clearance is so much better. We're talking about the exact same tire, not just same size, but same tire. This is our lockers. And now, and it's funny, it's muggy as hell outside. And I'm like out there pulling cable and all that. I come hop in here, AC's going, it's super comfortable. When you spend more money on a truck, you should get more truck, that's for sure.
With either one of these rigs, just because of their weight, with rock crawling, I'd usually be at about 8 PSI. And unfortunately, I took my air up setup out of the Landcruiser, and I was using it when I was camping last weekend in the Land Rover. And so we just aired down the tires and just kind of like kicked them till they looked bulgy-ish. It did not exactly work out. The Landcruiser definitely has a little bit more like flex in the tire. I think I aired down a little bit more than Matt did. But looking at how round these tires are on the Tacoma, we clearly are not low enough. But outside of that huge discrepancy, the Tacoma, it's so much easier to climb over these rocks. Again, same size tire, but because we have all that extra ground clearance just from it being independent front suspension and it having a slightly taller lift, it is night and day wheeling this in the rocks, I should say, versus wheeling my Landcruiser. I could easily just winch off of a tree with the Landcruiser, but the plan now is to get the Tacoma ahead of the Cruiser, because originally I was going to see how the Tacoma, like how it kept up with the Cruiser, but now I'm thinking the opposite. Let's see how the Cruiser can keep up with the Tacoma. So we're going to winch off the rear of the Tacoma and then continue to head up this rock garden and try to pick the exact same line and just see how they perform.
It's on the radio. You all good to go?
The old Cruiser is not making it easy to do a comparison video. At least not easy to say why I think the Cruiser is a better vehicle than Tacoma. Anyway, I had some corroded wire under there. It's something I was going to be taking care of as I'm working on it through the next few months. But now I did it right away. As soon as we were done with this trip, it got a brand new AGM battery from Full Throttle because the existing battery was toast. And I trimmed all the old wire off that was like touching the battery and corroded and old, and upgraded some of those leads, and things are good to go now. Anyway, back to the video. We're trying to make a comparison between the Toyota Tacoma and the Toyota Landcruiser with the perspective that newer Toyotas can't possibly be as good as old ones, right? Between consumers, modern consumers, and the government, modern car manufacturers have a tremendous amount of hoops they have to jump through, and you end up with what I think is a monument to compromise, and that's what this Tacoma is. Now, that said, when I'm out here wheeling it, the way it's set up now, it's amazing. It rides so nice, and there's so much ground clearance, and it's amazing on the highway. It's amazing for overlanding, just like hundreds of miles of dirt roads with bumps in them. It's good at all that, but you can't see out of it. You can't see, like, if you want to like peek your head out the window, the door is so tall in order to meet like modern side impact test ratings and stuff like that, that it makes it where you can't hardly like see where your driver's side tire is to index where you are on the trail. Those of you that like wheel and rock crawl like I do, you know how important that is. You can't see over the hood because for modern crash test stuff, they don't just want to make it better at hitting another vehicle. They want to make it better if you hit a pedestrian. And so for that reason, they're making grills taller. They're making hood lines taller so that whenever you hit someone, the theory is that they're going to like roll up and over the vehicle instead of just boom. I don't want to get too graphic here, but boom, and then they go down. So there's a ton of pressure on auto manufacturers to meet all this stuff, cafe ratings and more power and more luxury. And unfortunately, you end up with stuff that you can't fix. Like, no matter how much money I spend in this thing, I'm not going to have that much better of a seating position like the Landcruiser just comes with. You can see out of it. You can see out of the door. You can see over the hood. The way it feels, you have better headroom. All these things are easy to accomplish in the 90s, but they're almost impossible to accomplish by modern standards. You can see how tall the doors are, again, for safety. But the seats are extremely low, and I mean, your feet are right in front of you instead of you sitting over your feet. And this actually gives a lot of people, there's endless forums about this, and it gives a lot of people issues with their hips and whatnot. I'm actually one of them. A few days in a row in this thing, and it does start to hurt my low back. But there's a couple reasons for that. Because of aerodynamics, in order to, reduce emissions and make better MPG and all that other stuff, they made the roof shorter, everything is curved, and it makes it look better. At the end of the day, people buy stuff that they think looks really good. I love my wife's Gladiator as far as like the utility, but in my opinion, Gladiators are god ugly, and it's the same size tires and all that stuff. It's cool, there's something endearing about it, but the 3rd gen Tacoma actually looks good, which is why they sell a crap load more of these than they do the Gladiator. But again, you're giving up a lot that used to come standard on vehicles of this age, where if you look, the glass is so much higher, and because of where you're seated in there, your feet are actually below your body instead of just in front of instead of just like in front of your body. You're definitely not sitting on the floor. Now look how much shorter that door is. You can actually peek out and you can see the tire when you're wheeling, where you definitely cannot do that with the Tacoma. It's just not shaped in a way that will accommodate that. And again, it's all compromises, but the unfortunate thing is, this is back when they made purpose-built wheelers and sold them in America. This thing is so overbuilt, and it is designed to be really, really good off-road in a whole slew of metrics. And this, people want vehicles that are cheaper. People want vehicles that shift soft. People want vehicles that have better MPG and all this stuff. And in order to make it cheaper, they put drum brakes in it, whereas the Landcruiser comes stock with disc brakes. This had, and I've got coilovers and a 3-link in the rear now, but this had leaf springs. Like, these are all giant compromises. And when you look at the trends, the unfortunate thing is, I don't think in America we're ever gonna see anything like this Landcruiser ever again, aside from, I guess you could argue a lot of modern Jeeps still keep a lot of this stuff, but they still have a lot of the inherent issues that come with modern electrical gremlins. If I want this Toyota Landcruiser to go into 4 low, I just kick the transmission in neutral, I pull a lever, and there's mechanical linkage that makes the transfer case go into 4 low. I am not asking for this thing to go into 4 low. I am telling it to go into 4 low. Whereas the relationship with modern vehicles is much different because of all of the various computers that are making all the various systems work. So if I wanted to get the Toyota Tacoma to go into 4 high or 4 low, I kick the transmission into neutral, and then when I turn this dial, the dial is not connected to the transfer case. The dial is connected to a computer, and once I turn that dial, the computer is doing a whole bunch of checks to make sure that everything is functioning where the factory wants it to before it gives me permission to go into 4 high or 4 low. That's a completely different relationship, because if I snag an ABS line on a tree or something, or have an ABS sensor just go out, it might not let me use 4 high and 4 low. So I'm not telling it what to do. I'm asking for permission. And it's not just that. There's multiple systems in modern vehicles that function in this way. I don't have the oil pressure sensor in my Toyota Landcruiser is on the fritz. So it works, but it doesn't work great. And I know that there's pressure, so we're good to go. But I can still use the truck. It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't chime at me. It doesn't yell at me. It's just there's lights that'll come on. That's it. Whereas a modern truck, if you don't have oil pressure, like if you have a bad sensor or you have a severed line or something like that, you will not start that truck. So instead of me telling it to start, I'm asking for permission to use my truck. That is a completely different relationship. And the same thing with the cruise control. I've had lots of issues with the cruise control in the Toyota Tacoma because I'm not telling it that I want to use my standalone cruise control system, I'm asking it for permission to use this very integrated system that if there is a weird trouble code, or if there's a crash avoidance system malfunction, or if there's traction control malfunctions, it might not let me use cruise control. And to this day, Toyota does still make extremely simple trucks that do not have these overcomplicated nanny systems, but they don't sell them in America anymore.
Unfortunately, this is our fault here in the United States, because you vote with your dollars, and at least in the 90s, we were not voting to have a boxy, well overbuilt truck that, you know, triple lock, straight axle, all that other stuff. Because in 1997, the last year that you could buy an 80 series Land Cruiser in the United States, the LX450 sold, oh man, this marker's running out, 6,785 LX450s. And for those of you that don't know, the LX450 is the same thing as the 80 series Land Cruiser. The 1997 Toyota Land Cruiser, we bought 11,502. So total, we're at 18,287 robust, triple locked, overbuilt off-road trucks. In 2021, the reason I'm picking this is because this is what I own, is a 2021 Toyota Tacoma. We as Americans decided to buy 252,490 Toyota Tacomas. So that's a clear message to Toyota, obviously, of what we prefer here in the United States, because they continued to sell Land Cruisers. They just continued to sell, in my opinion, the lame Land Cruisers. Their IFS, which is not the end of the world, but the modern Land Cruiser, you're not getting it on 39s. It's very, very difficult. So if you're like me and you want to hit some of the hardest trails while still being able to do, you know, street driving and stuff like that, really one of the only ways to go would be, well, I shouldn't say the only ways. It's a little complicated. You can build anything on 39s. It's just how hard is it to get there? It's already difficult enough to do it in a 4Runner or a Tacoma, but it's a lot easier in one of those than it would be in like a 200 series Land Cruiser. So we voted to get rid of these easily built rigs here, and in the rest of the world, they continue to sell 80 series, and in Australia, they made the 105, which is a 100 series Land Cruiser on the 80 series straight axle, you know, really well overbuilt chassis. And then even today in 2023, most of the world, you can get the 70 series Land Cruiser, straight axle, triple lock, you know, boxy, good visibility, all the stuff that we as off-roaders say we want. But we just don't apparently have the appetite for that here in the United States, at least not at the price point, I think is probably the biggest issue. At least not the price point that they sell these really well-made, overbuilt trucks.
One other area that I don't see compared with from modern 4x4s to old school 4x4s is these elaborate airbag systems that you find in a lot of modern 4x4s. Now, Jeep doesn't have this issue. They don't do these really crazy side curtain airbag systems, but in the Toyota Tacoma, I've got A, B, and C pillar side curtain airbags. If that goes off and you've got a roll cage in there, it is not going to be pretty. I mean, these airbag systems are made to work without a giant piece of steel in their way. And there's an insane amount of power behind these bags. So will they blow up? What'll happen? I'm not exactly sure, but I know for sure they are not going to be functioning in the way that they're supposed to because there's a big piece of steel in the way. And in my opinion, in an extreme rollover, airbags just aren't going to cut it. So like in certain situations, these side curtain airbags are amazing and definitely increase the safety of the vehicle. But if you're doing really steep, really dangerous obstacles like we have all over the United States, I think that there's no substitute to just putting a good old-fashioned roll cage in there and making sure that even if you total your truck, you still come home safe.
3, 2, 1, go.
$25, $32, $37, $42, $47, $52, $56, $60. Stop. 12.2.
12.2. Go.
I mean, sounds good.
35, 39, 40, 41, 48, 50, 51, come on, 56. Ah, almost, but what'd you get?
Which one keeps oil and water separate? Well, it's a low blow. Low blow. This had 306,000 miles on it. It's a cast iron block and aluminum head. You do the math. Eventually the head gasket's gonna fail. It did, and it was fine. It's funny how well it performed. It just would lose coolant. But now it's got a brand new head gasket, head studs, new water pump. Like I had a local shop while I've been building the Samurai polish out a whole bunch of the high mileage parts in the engine bay, and now we are good to go. Tons of requests or tons are requested. Which one is it though? Both. I've had tons of requests to compare these two vehicles, and I've had tons of requests to put tons on the Tacoma and to put tons on this. Part of the attraction is that there's so much Toyota still in there, but they'd both benefit in a ton swap in a huge way. No chance I'm ton swapping the Tacoma. Way too new, way too many electronics. Like, there's a lot of unsolvable problems if you ton swap that. The dash should be lit up like a Christmas tree. And not only would I have to ton swap it, but I would definitely have to TK swap it because it wouldn't let me get in and out of four-wheel drive if I swapped that front axle out. This, however, let's go for a walk real quick. It's hard to see, but there is a passenger side drop, high pinion Dana 60 in the back of my J10. I didn't have anywhere else to store it, and this will end up on the Landcruiser if I have anything to do with it. I measured and it fits perfect. The offset of the front pinion is only off by like an inch, which is basically perfect. Even like where the springs land and where I made the third link, like upper control arm on that axle was built for my Land Rover Discovery passenger side drop. But because the frame rails are so narrow, I couldn't make it work. Well, I could have made it work, but it would not have worked the way I wanted it to. Whereas it looks like it will fit in here perfect to do like a 3-link in the front, and everything lines right up. So what I'm waiting on now is, first off, I'm just using it and enjoying it, but I'm trying to find the perfect rear axle that is passenger side offset to swap into this bad boy. I don't want to custom make an axle housing. I have read that there are some axles that are passenger side drop, that are 1 ton, full float, disc brake. Like, that's what I'm looking for. So I have some ideas of what we can do, maybe using a Sterling and playing with the different size hubs. But if you know of a 1 ton axle that is full float, disc brake and passenger side offset, like anywhere between 4 and 6 inches, let me know in the comments, because that's what I'm looking for to do a 1 ton swap. The final thought in this video is going to be the one that gets me in the most trouble. But if you are a Toyota fan and you want something that is like the ultimate off-roader, something that you can take on hard rock trails as well as overland, this is the last product they made and sold here in the United States. Sorry, they didn't make it here. They made and then they sold in the United States that checks all those boxes. This is the last of its kind. Such a great truck. And there's not a lot of them out there. If you've ever thought about owning one, I mean, you saw the numbers on the board over there. There's not a ton of them here. I would highly recommend buying them. And right now, I've seen a ton come down in price on Marketplace. So I might even buy a second one. I like them so much. But if you're looking for a modern truck that is equivalent to this, that checks all the boxes, you can get with lockers from the factory, that you can see out of, that you can easily put 39s on, you're looking for a Jeep Wrangler. That's unfortunate, but that's the truth. And not unfortunate for me, I'm not brand specific at all, but unfortunate if you're a Toyota owner. They just don't make stuff like this and sell it here anymore. The new Landcruiser looks super rad. I would absolutely build one. I would love to own one, but it is not this. Putting 39s on that is not going to be easy, and I'm definitely going to be reinventing the wheel. The new Tacoma, definitely superior to the old Tacoma, but again, it's not this. If you want a hardcore off-road truck that you can go and beat the hell out of and do everything with, this is it. If you want an overlander, you can do that out of anything else. But for those of us that like this new rock lander segment that is starting to blow up, I think that this is where it's at, or get a Jeep. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed the video. I did fall back in love with the Toyota Tacoma that I built. If you have the money, the Toyota Tacoma, that Tacoma is superior to this Landcruiser. There's no doubt about it. But if you are like a normal person that does not have just, you know, a YouTube channel to help you like build vehicles like that, I just don't think it's practical for your average Joe to build a Tacoma. But I think it's super practical to daily drive a built Landcruiser on 39s. I hope you enjoyed the video. We'll see you on the next one.